Women across 1950s America fell for the same man, the tall, devastatingly handsome movie star who seemed like the perfect husband material. Rock Hudson was everything they wanted: masculine, charming, and perpetually single but searching for the right woman. What they didn't know was that every single thing about this fantasy man was a carefully constructed fiction, orchestrated by Hollywood's most ruthless puppet masters. The transformation began with a photograph that changed everything. In 1947, a shy, 22-year-old truck driver named Roy Harold Scherer Jr. sent his headshot to talent scout Henry Willson, hoping for nothing more than a small break in Hollywood. Roy was the furthest thing from movie star material. He had terrible teeth, a high-pitched voice, awful posture, and a noticeable stutter that made him the target of bullies throughout his childhood. His father had abandoned the family during the Great Depression, leaving Roy with crippling insecurities and a desperate need for approval that would define his entire life. Willson saw something nobody else did. Not talent. Roy couldn't act to save his life. His first screen test required 38 takes just to deliver a single line correctly. What Willson saw was raw material that could be molded into the perfect fantasy. The agent didn't just change Roy's name. He performed surgery on his entire existence. The name Rock Hudson came from smashing together the Rock of Gibraltar and the Hudson River, but that was just the cosmetic beginning of a complete personality reconstruction. Everything about Roy Scherer was systematically destroyed and rebuilt. Willson enrolled him in intensive acting classes with drama coach Florence Cunningham. Voice specialists worked to lower his naturally high pitch into the deep masculine tones that would become Hudson's trademark. Posture experts corrected his Midwestern slouch. Dentists capped his crooked teeth. Even his laugh had to be retrained. Willson called his natural giggle too fluttery and girlish for a leading man. But the physical transformation was nothing compared to the elaborate fiction they created about his personal life. Hudson wasn't just hiding who he loved. He was living a double life that required Oscar-worthy acting skills every single day. While publicly dating a string of hired actresses, Hudson was actually gay in an era where that revelation would have destroyed not just his career, but potentially the entire studio system that employed thousands. The women he romanced were essentially paid performers, playing girlfriends for months at a time, while Hudson maintained his heterosexual facade with military precision. The scale of this deception was unprecedented in Hollywood history. Willson's publicity machine manufactured entire relationships out of thin air. Beautiful starlets would be hired to play Hudson's girlfriend for months at a time, complete with staged romantic dinners, weekend getaways, and carefully leaked stories to gossip columnists. These women weren't just appearing at premieres. They were living fake love stories, discussing their relationship in interviews and posing for romantic photographs that would fool the entire world. The deception reached its most cynical point in 1955, when Confidential magazine threatened to expose Hudson's sexuality in a devastating expose. Editor Robert Harrison had photographs and testimony that could have ended Hudson's career instantly. Willson's solution was brutal in its calculation: sacrifice other clients to save his biggest star. He fed Confidential damaging stories about Tab Hunter and Rory Calhoun in exchange for burying the Hudson story. But even that wasn't enough. The magazine wanted more insurance against future rumors. So Willson orchestrated the ultimate cover-up, a fake marriage. The chosen bride was Phyllis Gates, Willson's own secretary, who became an unwitting participant in Hollywood's most elaborate deception. Gates genuinely loved Hudson, but their marriage was doomed from the start, a business transaction disguised as romance. The wedding was rushed through in just 1 week, and within minutes of the ceremony ending, Willson was calling gossip columnists Hedda Hopper and Luella Parsons to spread the news. What's most heartbreaking is that Gates wasn't completely oblivious to the truth. And recently discovered recordings from their divorce proceedings, she confronted Hudson about finding men's photographs and questioning him about failed Rorschach tests that indicated his true orientation. "You told me you saw thousands of butterflies and also snakes," she said in one devastating recording. "A therapist told me that butterflies mean femininity and snakes represent the male penis. You're great speed with me, sexually. Are you that fast with boys?" Hudson's response was telling. "Well, it's a physical conjunction. Boys don't fit." The marriage lasted 3 miserable years before Gates filed for divorce on grounds of mental cruelty. The psychological warfare was constant and crushing. Hudson was essentially trapped in a legal and emotional prison, married to a woman who deserved genuine love, while he was forced to deny his authentic self every single day. The drinking started during this period as Hudson struggled to cope with the impossible demands of maintaining his fiction. He would disappear for entire nights, claiming work commitments while actually seeking temporary refuge in the underground gay community that existed in shadows. While his public life crumbled under the weight of deception, Hudson found genuine love with Lee Garlington in the early 1960s, a relationship he would later call his one true love. Garlington was an advertising executive who became Hudson's anchor in a world of lies. But even this beautiful connection had to be conducted in complete secrecy. They lived as roommates, traveled in separate hotel rooms, and Hudson could never acknowledge the person who meant everything to him. Friends who knew them described their relationship as tender and devoted, but always shadowed by the constant fear of discovery. The paranoia affected every aspect of Hudson's life. He couldn't hold Garlington's hand in public, couldn't introduce him as his partner, couldn't even look at him too affectionately when others were around. Their entire relationship existed in stolen moments behind closed doors. When Garlington finally learned years after Hudson's death that he had been called Hudson's one true love in the actor's authorized biography, he broke down crying, telling People magazine, "I had no idea I meant that much to him. Why didn't he tell me?" The studio system's grip on Hudson's life extended beyond romance into every aspect of his existence. Universal Studios monitored his social activities, approved his friendships, and even dictated his hobbies. When Hudson wanted to take flying lessons, the studio vetoed it as too dangerous for their investment. When he expressed interest in more serious dramatic roles, they forced him into another romantic comedy because that's what sold tickets. Hudson was essentially a prisoner of his own success, trapped by an image that made him rich and famous while slowly destroying his soul. In the 1980s, Hudson's carefully constructed world began to collapse when he was diagnosed with AIDS on June 5, 1984. By then, he was involved with Mark Christian, a much younger man who had become his live-in companion. What followed was perhaps the most controversial chapter of Hudson's story. He continued intimate relations with Christian for 8 months after learning he had AIDS, never revealing his condition. The secrecy that had defined Hudson's entire life now extended to matters of life and death. Christian only learned the truth the same way the rest of the world did, through a televised announcement from Paris in July 1985. The shock was so severe that Christian reportedly blacked out upon hearing the news. For months, he had watched Hudson's health deteriorate, accepting explanations about dieting and stress, while never suspecting the terrifying reality. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was potentially lethal, and Christian spent years living in terror that he might have contracted the virus. Hudson's AIDS revelation changed everything virtually overnight. He became the first major celebrity to publicly admit having the disease, instantly transforming AIDS from a gay plague that mainstream America ignored into front-page news affecting their beloved movie star. The announcement forced President Ronald Reagan, Hudson's former Hollywood colleague, to finally address AIDS publicly for the first time after years of silence. Within days, Hudson wrote a check for $250,000 to help launch the National AIDS Research Foundation, using his final months to fight the disease that was killing him. But even Hudson's final courageous act couldn't escape controversy. Mark Christian sued Hudson's estate for $21.75 million, claiming emotional distress from being unknowingly exposed to AIDS. The lawsuit revealed devastating details about Hudson's final months. His weight dropped from 215 to 140 pounds, and he attempted secret treatments in Paris while somehow maintaining his Dynasty television appearances. The trial became a media circus, with intimate details of their relationship splashed across tabloids worldwide. Christian won the case and was awarded over $5 million, though he never contracted HIV and actually outlived Hudson by 24 years, dying in 2009 from smoking-related illness. The most tragic irony of Hudson's story lies in what we've learned since his death about the very system that destroyed him. His agent, Henry Willson, who orchestrated this elaborate deception, was himself gay and allegedly exploited multiple male clients sexually in exchange for career advancement. Wilson's other clients included Tab Hunter, Troy Donahue, and Guy Madison, all gay men forced to live similar lives. The very system that demanded Hudson hide his sexuality was controlled by men living their own secret lives, creating a cycle of shame and exploitation that destroyed countless lives while enriching the puppet masters pulling the strings. Recent biographers have revealed that even Hudson's physical attributes were part of the fiction. While officially listed as 6'4", multiple sources suggest he may have been closer to 6'2", with studios routinely exaggerating his measurements just as they fabricated everything else about him. Co-star Jack Salia, who worked with Hudson on Dynasty, insisted Hudson was actually 6'6", saying, "I'm 6'1" and Rock dwarfed me. I've stood next to a lot of tall guys and Rock was not 6'4". Even Hudson's height became another battleground between reality and the manufactured image Hollywood needed to sell. What makes Hudson's deception so remarkable isn't just its scope, but the effectiveness and the incredible personal cost. For over 30 decades, he maintained this impossible balancing act, charming audiences while living in constant terror of exposure. His legendary chemistry with Doris Day in their romantic comedies wasn't just great acting, it was survival. Every smile, every romantic gesture, every perfectly delivered line was Hudson fighting for his life in a system that would have destroyed him for being authentic. Day later admitted she knew about Hudson's sexuality but kept his secret, understanding the stakes involved. The human cost of this elaborate fiction was staggering. Hudson developed chronic insomnia, relying on alcohol and sleeping pills to cope with the stress of maintaining his double life. Close friends described him as increasingly isolated and paranoid, unable to form genuine relationships because he could never be sure who might betray his secret. Even his closest platonic friendships with gay actors George Nader and his partner Mark Miller had to be carefully managed to avoid suspicion. These men became Hudson's surrogate family, ultimately inheriting his estate because they were the only people who truly knew and accepted him. Today, Hudson's legacy extends far beyond his filmography into the broader story of LGBTQ+ rights in America. His AIDS announcement marked a turning point in how the country viewed the disease and homosexuality, humanizing both in ways that saved countless lives. But it also exposed the incredible human cost of Hollywood's golden age, a time when the industry's biggest stars were forced to live as prisoners of their own success, denied the basic human right to love openly, while entertaining millions who never suspected their pain. The next time you see Rock Hudson on screen, remember that you're witnessing one of history's greatest performances. Not the romantic comedy he's starring in, but the decades-long show he performed just to survive in an industry that demanded he sacrifice his authentic self for America's entertainment. His smile hid one of Hollywood's most heartbreaking secrets, that its biggest heartthrob was actually its most isolated prisoner, trapped in a golden cage of his own image, performing heterosexuality so convincingly that he fooled the world while slowly destroying himself in the process.